From Wisconsin Public Radio and PRI, Public Radio International, it's To the Best of Our Knowledge. I'm Ann Strange-Champs. Thanks so much for being here, everybody. So how many of you remember the first time you fell in love? I do. He was tall, dark, handsome, seriously ripped. A little uncommunicative, maybe on the mysterious side. His name was Batman. I'm not kidding, really. Batman was my first crush. I was 5, 6 years old, and I used to watch him on TV every week. But you know, first crushes wear off, infatuations kind of go away, and I moved on to somebody much, much hotter. Catwoman. I'm not kidding. How do you explain the crazy randomness of who we fall for? You know, why is it that some crushes burn out while others grow into shared romance and lasting intimacy? Well, today we're going to see if science, and in particular evolution, can help unravel one of the greatest mysteries in the world, love. So where should we begin? How about sex? So what do you want first, the good news or the bad news? The good news is almost every creature on the planet has sex. Lots of sex, it's natural. The bad news is we humans are not the most interesting lovers on the planet. For sheer sexual variety, ingenuity, not to mention equipment, we've got nothing on the animal kingdom. Consider the nautilus, which has an immensely long, detachable swimming penis. Or the tapir, whose male member is so long and dexterous it can scratch its own back, which seems uncomfortable. If you're a fan of kinky, bedbugs copulate by stabbing each other. Quickies? Rabbits can do it in 30 seconds or less. So maybe we could learn a thing or two from our animal cousins. Our first guest today is a biologist who has devoted her life to laying bare the mysteries of sex in the animal kingdom. Her name is Dr. Carin Bondar. You have maybe seen her on her web series, Wild Sex, or caught her on Discovery World, National Geographic, the Science Channel. Carin is relentless in her pursuit of the science behind wild animal sex and amazingly inventive in how she communicates it. So please welcome Dr. Carin Bondar.
Hi, thank you so much. It is my pleasure to be here tonight. Thank you. So yeah, I'm here to talk to you a little bit about some of the things that are maybe not as pretty as pure love might be. I'm going to start off with a perspective for you. So we're here to talk about the evolution of love, and a very, very important part of Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection is that you need to survive, of course, but it doesn't mean much to survive if you haven't reproduced. And that's where my work comes in. And I really like thinking about the notion of biological fitness, and that is something that we biologists ascribe to all animals, that all animals are working to maximize their biological fitness or their representation of their own genetic material in future generations. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean having as many offspring as your body will allow. It means trade-offs, it means costs, benefits, thinking about what might work and what might not. And I really like using this infographic here because it shows you something, well, that's pretty darn obvious. The sexual cells, or the gametes, are pretty different from one another. Here we have a whole bunch of sperm swimming around the big moon-like egg. And that's pretty telling. That tells you a lot about the strategies of males versus females when it comes to sex. Conceivably, any one man in here, pun very much intended, could fertilize every single woman in the audience. Maybe take him a couple of days. But in every single ejaculate, a human male has about 70 million sperm. Compare that to us females who ovulate one egg once per month And if that egg happens to get fertilized, we are then out of reproductive commission for a further 9 months at least. So that means for females that who we choose to have sex with is a pretty darn big decision. Whereas for males, it's kind of like, let's just ejaculate every single time we get a chance. And that's really, push comes to shove. Of course, there's always exceptions to the rule, but that's what we see in the animal kingdom. And so you can imagine that this sets the scene for some pretty drastic strategies for successful reproduction. Now, I'd like to get you thinking about animals having sex in a way that maybe you haven't before. And that's because I think a lot of people don't realize that sex for animals, much like it is for us, is a process. I like to think about sex as having 3 phases. First, you've got to meet or find that potential partner. Hopefully, many of you are here tonight on dates. And chances are you didn't simply identify the person that you're with as a member of the opposite sex, walk up to them and start copulating. Well, why would you think animals do it any differently? They have to decide whether or not a potential partner is going to be worthy of them, whether they're compatible. And there are many ways that animals court each other and try to convince each other that, yes, well, mostly it's the males that are trying to do the convincing to have sex with them. Then, of course, you have to have the sex. And that, I guess, is maybe some of the juiciest material I'll talk about tonight. And then lastly, you've got to deal with the aftermath of your sexual conquests, and that is dealing with the offspring. Because if your offspring don't make it to sexual reproduction, then your biological fitness is pretty stunted. So let's think about meeting someone. Humans kind of think that we have it pretty rough. Cities are big. How am I supposed to get out there and find that perfect guy or that perfect girl? But we actually have some pretty good strategies for finding a mate. We have online dating, clubs, friends of friends. We have lots of ways that we can communicate, first of all, that we're looking, and second of all, that we're interested in somebody once we've seen them a time or two. Animals have a lot of ways to do this too. There are songs, there are dances, there are smells, there's a whole lot of things. But one thing about big cities is that we're actually interfering quite a bit with the ways in which animals can meet each other. I mean, think about it. In a beautiful venue like this, you're on a first date, it's pretty noisy. And this is actually something in the literature called the cocktail party problem. And it is a problem. If you cannot hear what the person across from you is saying, how can you decide whether or not there's somebody that you want to mate with, potentially? Well, in large urban centers, birds can't hear each other. And in fact, many male songbirds in urban centers end up being unpaired during the mating season. But in the context of evolution, other males are evolving different ways to sing, using different note patterns at different frequencies. And certain grasshoppers are actually using different parts of their bodies to make noises that are entirely different than they would have otherwise. All of these things in an effort to be heard in an environment that they didn't evolve with all of this noise. So very interesting, thinking about how we can find a partner if it's really noisy. Now, another thing that people maybe don't think about is having sex when we're sick. If you're vomiting or spewing snot all over the place, chances are you don't feel terribly attractive, and quite frankly, you're not all that attractive. But what happens to an animal if it's got a very short breeding season or one breeding season, and this is it? What happens then? I mean, injuries happen in the animal kingdom. There are broken feather, broken bones, broken wings, surface abrasions, all sorts of things. There are bacterial infections, viral infections, all sorts of things. There are also sexually transmitted diseases. Whoops. There we go. Oh, I see. They're both on the same slide there. Excellent. There are also sexually transmitted diseases in the animal kingdom. And the koala that you see up there, lovely, little, cuddly, happy representative of Australia, well, almost the entire indigenous population of koalas in Australia has chlamydia. Yeah, it's horrible. It's not fun for them, and it's not fun for anybody who's watching them try to mate with one another, but they all got it the honest-to-goodness way by having sex, and it gets transferred very, very easily. It's been such a huge issue in Australia that scientists have now developed a vaccine and a cure for them. So we humans aren't the only ones who have to think about being sick, being injured, or even having an STI. So let's talk about the sex, That's why we're all here, to hear about all the horror stories. And frankly, there are quite a few. One of the most perverse strategies in the animal kingdom is that of sexual cannibalism. And I'm going to let this little ditty speak for itself. Here we have two praying mantids. We have the female on the front, the male on her back. She has just gone ahead and interrupted, well, his fun by ripping off his head. She is now eating his head, but you will notice, and this is the important bit, his body, see him there? There's a little droplet where his head used to be. His body is continuing to have sex with her. And so what I told you at the beginning, as far as biological fitness and getting your genes into future generations, you're probably saying, well, Dr. Bondar, how is he supposed to get his genes into future generations if he's dead? And that is a good question, a valid question. But in this particular case, and in many cases where sexual cannibalism is a thing, there are valid reasons for it. In many cases, a mantid male won't get very many chances to have sex. And it makes a lot of sense for him to have sex with a female, especially if she's a virgin, because he can then be having sex with her continuously while she is busy eating his head, and his sperm will have a greater amount of time to reach her ovaries. It makes much more sense for him to do this than to jump off right away, maybe survive, but his sperm really hasn't had a chance to transfer to her at all. So she will then go on and eat the rest of his body, giving his sperm a large chance to reach her ovaries, and chances are he will be successful at reproducing here. Now, virgins aren't always the best case scenario for males involved in sexual cannibalism. In some spider species, a female will actually engage in precopulatory sexual cannibalism, making her first male partner nothing more than a light snack. And so males will very carefully observe and will record the chemical signatures on a particular female. And if she's already been with a male, they're much more likely to go ahead and mate with her because she's full. And so she probably won't be interested in eating him. Something like 75% of the time, she will not eat the second male that she copulates with. So I wish I had more time. I could tell you about head-stabbing penises and all the rest, but I must move on to phase 3, which is the aftermath. And in our species, we tend to engage in our offspring a lot. We do so much work for our offspring, and in fact, so much that I'm writing another book about that called Wild Moms, which will be out next spring. But motherhood in the animal kingdom is a very complicated job. And birds do this wonderful thing for us to enable them to study them, to enable us to study them. They create eggs, mothers do, which are these beautiful little packages of nutrients and hormones and all kinds of goodies that they directly provide to a certain offspring. And sometimes dad can be a little less than desirable. And so biologists studying allocation of resources in female birds use this system in particular, the blue-footed booby, because we all know that blue-footed booby males have these gorgeous blue feet, and that's what the females use to choose a particular guy. And they also have a really interesting mating system. The male and the female will copulate, and the female will immediately lay one egg. 72 hours later, she'll lay another one from that same copulation. So biologists went ahead, and in between the laying of her 2 eggs, they painted his feet a dull gray. I know, poor guy. But interestingly, this is astounding. When the second egg came along, it was much smaller, had fewer hormones and fewer sugars. So she was able to interpret this difference in the mating partner and ascribe her resources accordingly. Now, as I mentioned, we human females do tend to provide a lot of care to our offspring. And in some cases, I suppose you could argue, those of us that maybe still live at home in our 30s and 40s, we provide way too much. But somewhere along our evolutionary line, during the Plio-Pleistocene era, when resource bases were changing, it became more advantageous for a mother's mother to start lending her help. instead of the mother's mother having more children of her own. We know that it's hard on an aging body to have additional children. And so the grandmother hypothesis describes what's happened in our species, which is grandmothers help their daughters and their daughters' offspring, because we undergo reproductive senescence. We're almost unique in the animal kingdom in having this thing where females stop being biologically active about halfway through our lives. It's only us and the toothed whales that undergo reproductive senescence. And so, around the age 45 or so, we stop ovulating. It makes more sense biologically for us to help our daughters and our daughters' children. Why do I keep saying daughters? Well, because I know which children came out of my vagina, as does every woman in this room. Kind of hard to miss. You know that the children, therefore, coming out of your daughter's vagina are your grandchildren. That we know. Your son tells you that he's impregnated Jane over there. Jane has the baby. You don't know. This is called paternity uncertainty, and it's why we never see, rarely see, monogamy in mammals, because you don't know. I don't know who Johnny's been off playing around with. Jane might have been playing around with Peter, too. I don't know. So we don't see grandmotherly care evolving much in the animal kingdom. And then lastly, the group of animals where we see reproductive senescence as well is the toothed whales. And this is a really interesting story from a grandmotherly perspective as well, because grandmother orcas do something totally different. Orcas live in large pods that tend to be matriarchal. So there will be a grandmother at the helm, and the pod will consist of her adult children and their children. During the reproductive season, the males and the females will both go off. The females will go and get impregnated outside of the pod and come back. The males will go and impregnate somebody outside of the pod and come back. So grandma realizes an increase in biological fitness through both of her children. However, her daughters then have the calves, and the calves become part of the pod. And so that means more work for grandma. More food gathering, more defense of a larger pod. She got the same amount of biological fitness from her son, who went off and impregnated somebody, and she didn't have to do any extra work. So interestingly, grandmother orcas heavily defend their adult sons, so much that it is more than 7 times more likely that an adult son will die in the year following his mother's death than a daughter will. So 2 totally different strategies for grandmothers in the animal kingdom, both kind of interesting in their own way. That is all the time that I have, but please don't feel free. Don't get a hold of me. No, please feel free. Don't hesitate to contact me. This is all of my information. Wild Sex is the book that's available now. Wild Mums will be out in Mother's Day of 2018. And thank you so much for your attention.
Sorry, that took me a second. Sorry about that. That took me a second. Males, you know we are.
Right?
I got to ask you, I'm listening to that, and I'm like, are males in all species, are we all crappy, or is it just humans?
You know, it's an interesting perspective. In a lot of species, they're around simply for the sperm.
But we get
Not
judged
gonna lie.
for that in humans.
Not gonna lie. But yeah, you know, and in mammals, really there isn't much a male can do once impregnation has occurred. There really isn't much a male can do. Sometimes I say to my audiences, okay, guys, hands up. Everybody can do this for me. Hands up. Clasp your fingers. Bring them down in front of you. Okay. And twiddle.
Oh.
It's about all a male mammal can do once his partner is impregnated.
My wife would disagree. I read her poetry while she was breastfeeding the first thing. Can we do that? Is that nice?
It's adorable.
But not necessary
Totally
for evolution.
No.
Jesus, I told you. She's like, whatever. I got to ask you, I'm thinking because to do research for this, to ask you questions, I go on the internet, right? And I watch videos of you, which are crazy interesting. And you're all over the internet, and I think to myself, how does this affect your personal life? Like from dating to just the whole thing, how does it affect you?
You know, that's a really interesting question, and I don't know that there's a very straightforward answer, but I was dating. So my husband and I split up about 3.5 years ago, and I was back out there, and
You must have Googled, dudes would be Googling you, right?
I don't know. maybe, but I felt like I was expecting the guys that I was dating to act like males in the animal kingdom. I mean, for a while there, I was just out there. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna play the field. I'm gonna, date. But the guys were more the ones that were just like, you're dating other people. Like it was strange, and I think I expected them. I guess that's because right when I was writing the book, I was very expected that they wouldn't mind.
Did you tell them that? Like, you go on dates? I'm like, dude, one, you're not acting cool like other males, and if you keep this way, I'm gonna eat your head off.
It was strange, yeah.
No,
totally.
you didn't. I get to see them being intimidated by that. You have kids, right?
I do.
Yeah, you have a brood, right?
I
You
do.
have
I have 2 girls and 3 boys.
Wow, there you go.
That's a lot.
See, it's
Yeah.
a lot. You took this stuff to heart. Some of this stuff to heart is when you talk about koalas, cute little koalas being great carriers of STDs, and squirrels, who are the only animal in the animal kingdom that masturbates after they have sex to clean themselves from all their disgustingness. And then you have a kid going through puberty. I can imagine them being like, "Mom," like, could they know what you do?
It's true, and I got, when the web series first came out, a bunch of people would say like, "Oh, your kids are gonna hate you," but actually, I think on some level they think it's kind of cool. At least their friends think it's cool. If my own children, especially the ones going through puberty, don't think it's cool, I recently had them do a little video about my new book. What do you think? Mom's writing a new book, and the 11-year-old.
Remind us the name of the new book again.
The
Their kids
called
filmed for
Wild Mom.
Wild Moms.
And
Okay.
the other one was called Wild Sex, and the 11-year-old just looked at me and said, "Well, thank God it's not about sex."
I have a question. Now, I'm assuming, and we can't see very well the people out here, but I'm assuming, because it's near Valentine's Day, we were talking about this earlier, it's near Valentine's Day, there's a couple hundred people here, and a lot of people here seem to be on dates. Even if you're married, you can be on a date, and you're on dates. So let's also assume that a lot of people in this room are going to have sex with each other, and that between now and Valentine's Day, it's kind of a time to have sex. And maybe even more so after tonight, because they got a poem, and it's all nice, and they're, blah, blah,
No
blah.
pressure.
A lot of good stuff happened to them. You're an expert on the kind of animals and sex. They're animals. Could you, real quick, can you raise your hand if you're here on a date? Anybody here on a date? Just raise your hand. You know where I'm going to go. You know where I'm going. You might as well raise it now. Oh, my heavens. Really? That's so nice. It's cute. Can you give them some, they're going to have sex later. Can you give them some advice?
Well,
You walked into that one.
I would say, and I do say this to people a lot, channel your inner bonobo, because we are equally related to chimps and bonobos. Chimps are coercive and violent. Bonobos are very happy and very sexual, and they are not opposed to anything. So I always tell people to try to find their inner bonobo a little more.
That is the best advice I've heard all day. Carin, thank you very much. I learned
It's my
so much.
pleasure.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.
Thank
That was Dr. Carin Bondar. Working. There we go. That was Dr. Carin Bondar. She's a biologist, author of the book Wild Sex. You can currently see her on the Discovery Channel's Outrageous Acts of Science, and that was our very own outrageous producer, Charles Monroe-Kane.